The train screamed into the little frontier town with a howl of iron and steam, coughing smoke that settled over Main Street like a funeral veil. Out of the gray stepped Clara Mayfield, her boots touching the platform as if the boards might splinter beneath her weight. She carried a small trunk polished smooth from years of handling, and a dress wrinkled by the long ride from the east. Her eyes, a sharp prairie blue, scanned the waiting crowd not for comfort but for escape. He was waiting there, Randall Boone, the richest man for 100 miles, owner of half the cattle that grazed the sunburnt grasslands. His body swelled against his waistcoat, buttons straining with every breath. A gold watch chain gleamed across his belly, a silent testimony to wealth won through sweat of other men's backs. He held his hat awkwardly, the brim damp with the sweat of his palms. When he smiled, it looked less like welcome and more like a claim already laid. The crowd buzzed with curiosity. Children peeked around their mothers' skirts. Old men spat tobacco and muttered wagers on how long a girl like that would last under Boone's roof. Clara felt the sting of their gazes as surely as if they'd been lashes. She straightened her shoulders, though the weight of expectation pressed like an anvil across her chest. "Miss Mayfield." Boone's voice boomed, thick with pride. He stepped forward, taking her gloved hand before she had chanced to offer it. His grip was damp, possessive. "Welcome to your new home." Her throat tightened. The words "my home" echoed in her skull like iron bars slamming shut. She pulled gently, but his grip remained. She managed a nod, her lips dry. The sheriff stood nearby, arms folded, watching with a gaze too knowing. Amos Fletcher had kept order here for 20 years, and in his eyes lived the weary knowledge that deals of land and women often carried the same ink. Clara felt him watching, weighing her silence. The supper that followed was served in Boone's estate, a great house built wide against the plains, its halls echoing with emptiness. The long table gleamed with polished wood, food laid heavy and rich, roast beef, potatoes drenched in butter, biscuits stacked high. Boone carved with flourishes, speaking of his cattle herds, of fences stretching to the horizon, of barns filled with hay and horses bred for strength. He spoke with the hunger of a man desperate to be admired. Clara ate little, her fork trembling against porcelain. The smell of meat made her stomach twist. Boone leaned close, his breath thick with whiskey. "You'll do well here. Strong ranch needs a strong breeding wife. A good housekeeper too." His chuckle followed, booming through the hollow room. She placed her fork down, fingers curling into her lap. Heat climbed her cheeks, but it was not from the fire snapping in the hearth. Every word pinned her deeper into the chair, a prize calf displayed at auction. Her voice came quiet, so quiet she scarcely believed it left her throat. "I cannot." The word cracked the room. Boone froze, knife in hand, beef bleeding onto the plate. He turned, his eyes narrowing to slits, the pride draining from his face. Then came laughter, loud, cruel, echoing off every wall. He slammed the knife down, the blade biting into wood. "Cannot. Girl, you're already mine." But she stood, trembling though she was, her chin lifting a fraction. "I will not." His face reddened, jowls quivering. He rose, towering, and for a moment Clara thought his hand would strike. Instead, he shoved the chair aside and stormed into the hall, boots thundering like drums of war. The door slammed, rattling the windows. By morning, gossip spread faster than wildfire. Clara stepped into town and found parasols tilted against her, whispers stitched into the air. Ungrateful. Spoiled. Who does she think she is, turning down a man like Boone? The general store clerk avoided her eyes. Children giggled behind their mothers. Every face became a mirror of judgment. Sheriff Fletcher stopped her on the boardwalk. His voice was low, but the weight of warning pressed hard. "Best leave, Miss Mayfield. Boone's pride ain't gentle when wounded." His eyes softened, but his meaning did not. She returned to her rented room above the seamstress's shop, tears pressing hot but never spilling. That night, she stared at the cracked ceiling, hands twisted in the quilt. She saw Boone's face, the town's whispers, her own reflection in the wash basin, thin, pale, trembling. Shame gnawed her bones, but somewhere beneath it smoldered the faintest ember of defiance. It was Evelyn who came to her door, carrying the softness Clara had always leaned on. The younger sister entered without a word, placed a shawl over Clara's shoulders, and held her until silence became too heavy. "You can't go back," Evelyn whispered. "But maybe I can." Clara pulled away, horrified. "No, never. I would not trade your freedom for my mistake." Evelyn's smile was sad, tender, full of resignation. "Better one bound than both ruined. The town won't forgive you, but he'll take me. I can endure." Clara shook her head until tears spilled at last. "I will not let you." But Evelyn's hands were steady, her eyes gentle. She kissed Clara's forehead as a mother might. "It is already done." At dawn, Clara stood on the porch and watched her sister ride toward Boone's ranch, the red horizon bleeding like an open wound. Evelyn's figure grew smaller, swallowed by dust and distance. Clara's heart clenched, a weight heavier than stone pressing. The wind sighed through the cottonwoods as Evelyn Boone, once Evelyn Mayfield, moved across the wide porch of the estate. Her figure looked smaller against the columns, a silhouette pressed into the grandeur of Randall Boone's house like ink on parchment. Weeks had passed since she had taken her sister's place, yet she felt no more at home than the day she arrived. The ranch stretched endless around her, cattle bawling in the distance, the air thick with dust and pride. And inside those walls, Randall's voice carried louder than any storm. He had married her quickly, without ceremony beyond a preacher's muttered blessing. Town folk whispered that the younger sister had been easier, more pliant. Boone basked in it, parading her through church doors, gripping her arm too tightly as though she might flee if he loosened his hold. In company he called her "my sweet wife," his tone sugared with ownership. Alone he was sharp, his words like spurs digging. He did not strike her. Randall knew his reputation must remain untarnished, but his cruelty was sharper for being hidden. Evelyn endured in silence. At night, she lay beneath quilts heavy as chains, her hands folded over her stomach, whispering prayers that her sister might find peace far from here. By day, she moved through the house like a ghost, arranging flowers, mending linens, pouring tea that always cooled before Randall noticed. But one pair of eyes saw her. Silas Hart, the ranch hand, broad-shouldered and quiet as dusk, tended the horses with patience that spoke of wounds deeper than words. He never lingered long in her presence, but sometimes when she paused by the corral, he tipped his hat and offered a brief, steady glance that felt like recognition. Once, she returned to her room to find wildflowers laid across the windowsill, dew still clinging to their stems. She did not ask who left them. She only pressed them to her cheek and let herself breathe. Meanwhile, Clara walked the streets of town with her head bowed. She worked sewing hems, scrubbing floors, taking whatever task the shopkeepers gave. Her hands grew raw, but her shame was heavier than labor. She heard the whispers still. The proud one. The selfish one. The girl who thought she was too good for Boone. She bore them, each word a stone in her pocket. Nights she sat by the small oil lamp, writing letters to Evelyn she never sent, her tears blotting the ink. It was the gossip of Evelyn's sickness that broke her silence. A boy from the ranch, sent to town for medicine, let slip the truth. The new Mrs. Boone had taken ill after standing too long in cold rain, forced by her husband to wait outside while he finished a deal with cattlemen. Clara felt her breath shatter. She dropped the sewing from her lap and ran, skirts catching in the mud, feet carrying her toward the estate that had stolen her sister. She arrived as evening fell, the sky bruised purple. Boone stood on the porch, whiskey glass in hand, his body filling the doorway like a barricade. "You've no place here," he thundered when she demanded to see Evelyn. She is mine. Not yours. Mine. His voice carried down the road where a few townsfolk lingered, drawn by the rumor of a sister's return. Clara's voice trembled but did not falter. A man may buy land, Randall Boone. He may build fences and claim rivers. But he cannot own a woman's soul. The words struck like a rifle crack. Silence rippled through the gathered crowd. Boone's face darkened, jowls quivering. He stepped forward, arm raised as if to strike, but before his hand could fall, Silas' heart moved. The ranch hand caught Boone's wrist, grip steady as iron. "Enough," he said, voice low but carrying. The sheriff arrived then, drawn by the commotion. Amos Fletcher looked from Boone's reddened face to Clara's pale resolve, then to Evelyn, who had appeared in the doorway, leaning weakly against the frame. Her skin was pallid, hair damp, her body swaying as if each breath cost her dearly. The crowd gasped, whispers breaking like surf. "She'll not last another week under him," an old woman muttered. Boone roared, yanking free of Silas. "She is my wife. By God's law, by man's law." The sheriff raised his hand, firm and steady. "By decency's law, Randall, she belongs first to herself." His voice rang out, weary yet resolute. "You've shamed this town long enough." Boone's fury faltered. He looked around and found no loyal eyes, no nods of support, only turned faces and stiff backs. His wealth could not shield him from their silent judgment. For the first time he seemed small, the bulk of his body no armor against their disapproval. Clara rushed forward, catching Evelyn as she stumbled. The younger sister collapsed into her arms, whispering through fevered lips, "I'm sorry." "No," Clara breathed, holding her close, tears streaking her cheeks. "It is I who failed you." Silas steadied them both, his hand gentle against Clara's shoulder. Together they led Evelyn down the steps, past Boone's heaving chest, past the murmuring townsfolk. Boone shouted after them, words tumbling into rage, but no one listened. His voice broke into the night like a coyote's cry, ignored by the stars. They carried Evelyn to the doctor's house, where lamplight spilled warm and hopeful across the street. Clara sat beside her sister's bed through the night, her hand never leaving Evelyn's. Silas brought water, tended the fire, his presence a quiet anchor. In the still hours before dawn, Evelyn's fever broke. Her breathing steadied, and color returned faintly to her cheeks. Clara wept then, but not from shame. From relief, from the fragile beauty of knowing her sister might yet see another sunrise. She whispered promises, of never leaving her again, of building a life not bound by contracts written in desperation. When morning came, the sisters rose together. Clara walked out into the street, her hand supporting Evelyn's. Silas followed a step behind, hat in hand, offering not possession but solidarity. The townsfolk watched in silence, some with shame, others with quiet admiration. Randall Boone remained behind his gates, his windows shuttered. His wealth sat heavy in his barns, but his house had grown emptier than ever. The empire of cattle and fences had not kept love, nor loyalty, nor respect. Clara lifted her chin as the sun spread gold across the dusty street. She no longer bowed beneath whispers. She carried her sister, her dignity, and a new, unspoken bond with a quiet man who had chosen kindness over fear. The narrator's voice lingered, soft as wind through tall grass. The West was not built by those who yielded, but by those who carried their shame with grace until it hardened into strength. Remember this, dear listener. No paper signed in ink can bind the spirit. Even in the loneliest deserts, the heart will find its way home.